Aloha, I'm Monroe Murdoch, broker owner of Love Hawaii Realty and Love Hawaii Villas, and today I will be sharing some news updates as they pertain to Hawaii travel, tourism, and vacation planning. And we are doing our best to keep a pulse on the latest news. There's been a lot of updates coming since Memorial Day weekend here, so this video will do our best to catch you up to speed, and then we'll do frequent updates with the latest happening moving forward. So I'll cover as much as I can, as quick as I can. I'm going to be referring to some notes here. Please do click the like button and share this video with others who may have an interest in the latest in Hawaii travel. And then also be sure to click the subscribe if you want to keep in the loop with the future updates that we'll be putting out. So with that, let's jump right in. Remember that you can reference the link in the description below, which will take you to a page on our website where we have all of the reference news articles linked there in case you want to dig in, watch the videos, read those articles. You can get a lot more information. So first, let's talk about the COVID-19 case counts in Hawaii. No new cases reported for the third consecutive day. The statewide total since day one is 643 cases, with 593 people having been released from isolation, only 83 having required hospitalization, and more than 50,000 people tested in Hawaii for COVID, meaning that approximately 1.2% of those who were tested were found to have the virus. So fortunately for Hawaii, we have some of the lowest case counts in the entire country, and of course our officials are doing all they can to keep it that way. Next is visitor travel restrictions. The 14-day mandatory quarantine for all visitors and returning residents remains in effect through June 30th at present. That would be anyone flying into Hawaii, whether visitor or resident, would be subject to a very strict 14-day quarantine. What happens after June 30th is still up in the air. Will that be extended? Will some visitor travel come in? We'll talk about that a little bit more here, but this is something you're going to have to monitor, keep a pulse on. I would say if you have a July booking reservation plans to come to Hawaii in July, I would hold off for now, wait a little longer into June to see what's happening before you make any changes, because it is a changing dynamic by the day for sure. Big question is, when will quarantine be lifted? At this point, we don't really know for sure. What we know is that officials are looking into the viability of requiring Hawaii visitors to take a COVID test prior to coming, possibly needing to present a negative COVID test before being allowed to come to Hawaii. And if they don't, they would be subject to a quarantine. There's been a bit of talk about that. Lieutenant Governor Josh Green talked about how travelers from Japan, Australia, and New Zealand may likely be suggested to be the first geographic areas to be allowed to return to Hawaii because their case counts are lower, and they also account for a large part of a significant chunk of our tourism dollars, and so they're focusing on that, not so much continental U.S. U.S. and also North American travelers. So that's kind of interesting, and again, something that we need to watch. The state is struggling to enforce the onerous 14-day quarantine. Obviously, if someone wants to break it, they could, but they do run the risk of being arrested or being fined. They are doing their best to try to strictly enforce that quarantine. About a year ago at this time, we had about 30,000 people a day arriving to Hawaii. At present, it's about 1,000 people a day are coming. Many residents, a few hundred visitors are coming daily, but again, they are subject to the 14-day quarantine. What is it like currently on Oahu? So still a lot of stores and activities are closed for the time being. Mostly essential businesses are open, food and household goods type stores. A variety of restaurants are open. Most retail stores are not yet open, though some are starting to reopen. And majority of people that are out and about are wearing masks when they're going to stores, picking up food or other things. You are expected and required to wear a mask when you're having those kind of business interactions, going through a drive-through, picking up food at a restaurant. When people are at the beach or park or just walking around or exercising, they're typically very commonly not wearing masks. So anytime people can safely social distance, you'll notice many people are not wearing masks, but when you're going out and about to stores and parking lots and things like that, majority of people will be wearing masks. What is the status of legal vacation rentals? Legal vacation rentals are still deemed as non-essential, at least for Honolulu County on Oahu. The hope is that that will soon change once inter-island travel resumes. So now into a bunch of different news updates and headlines from the past couple of days. Most of the 242,000 unemployed workers in the islands are tied to the visitor industry, at least 2/3 of them. And the hope is to bring back 35% of those who have lost their jobs by the end of this year. Could be 5 years they're projecting before visitor numbers get back to where they were. Again, this is these are economists and others kind of guessing at how it's going to look for the future, which is really hard to predict given a lot of the different uncertainties. Second highest unemployment rate in the nation is right here in Hawaii, and our tourism sectors are obviously more severely impacted with the levels of unemployment. 2019, we had over 10 million visitors to Hawaii. Projections are currently showing that 3.5 million visitors for 2020 would be expected. So basically a third of the visitor travel in 2020 over what we had previously in 2019. 68% decrease in travel if those numbers end up playing out to be 3.5 million visitors by the end of the year. They're estimating 6.2 million visitors for 2021 and potentially up to 5 years for rebounding to the 2019 levels of tourism in Hawaii. The Department of Business and Economic Development projects that the visitor industry in islands won't open in earnest until September, and that visitor arrivals for 2020 will top out at 3.4 million visitors. Now again, this is the Department of Business and Economic Development. They are not the decision makers as to when Hawaii will reopen. This is just their opinion and what they're thinking. So a lot of times what happens, keep in mind the news stations pick up on that, they talk about that, they put it out there as if it's a fact. It's not a fact. We have to keep in mind that the elected officials control a lot of this, a lot of what happens. So instead of making rash decisions, we need to just be informed, keep a pulse on it, watch what's happening. A lot of people will say a lot of different things right now, and we need to be able to kind of go through that, distill the information down into really, who are the decision makers and what are they doing, because that's really what matters at this time. And then, okay, so as far as the visitor levels, the level of tourism right now has not been seen since the late 70s in terms of how many visitors are coming to Hawaii for 2020 projected. Hawaii saw 3.9 million visitors in 1980, and that was that equates to a decrease of 67.5% from 2019 when we had over 10 million visitors. So essentially we're going back 50 years in time in terms of visitor levels projected for 2020. That's pretty fascinating. So several years expected for tourism to get back to where it was. As I mentioned, Lieutenant Governor Josh Green would like to start reopening Hawaii travel in July, but not for travelers from continental US. It would potentially start with Japan, New Zealand, and Australia. There was a recent polling done of Governor Ige and the mayor and other lieutenant governor and others were rated. The Governor David Ige's ratings were not very good. 54% had a negative viewpoint on him and his handling of this crisis, feeling that he's lacking in a lot of leadership capabilities at this time. And so that was interesting. We have that article linked. And Mayor Kirk Caldwell of Honolulu County, which governs all of Oahu, is expected to talk today about plans to reopen local businesses and reboot the economy. Again, that doesn't directly affect travel and visitors, but it is at the local level here, hopefully a step in the right direction. Hotel occupancy rates at just 9%, and 40,000 hotel jobs are at stake as hotels lose millions of dollars a month. Inter-island travel could be resuming soon for those who live in Hawaii, and that is being looked at. Local church services can resume with restrictions. And again, Hawaii's unemployment rate jumps from 2.4% in March to 22.3% in April. Significant increase, and the actual unemployment numbers would be higher were it not for PPP funding that a lot of businesses received, including our own. The governor's plan for kind of a local reopening of the economy lays out a bunch of different steps, and what's really surprising in his plan is it doesn't make any mention of visitor travel and tourism. When asked about that during a press conference, he basically said, that comes later. So again, kind of speaking to the polling that was done, he's not effectively addressing the need to respond to the timeline for Hawaii visitor travel. There is more conversation happening. I feel like the conversation around this is ramping up, and it makes sense because the pressure is building around that for the Hawaii's visitor industry being such a huge part of our economy. They need to be spending more time, more energy, more money on this and figuring out some solutions quickly. Neighbor island updates, not a whole lot to report there. I mean, we covered a lot for the islands and Hawaii as a whole, but we do have some salons and other businesses reopening on Kauai, Maui, on Big Island. each of these islands are governed by, different counties. So you have different, mayors involved with these types of decisions. And then of course you have the governor at the state level and trying to communicate together. So it's a little bit dysfunctional, disjointed in a way, and it's politics, what can you say? But hopefully they can bring it together and have more of a united front in what needs to be happening. Also on Big Island, the 2020 Ironman 70.3, which is basically a half Ironman race, has been postponed a couple times and has now been rescheduled to take place November 21st. I believe they expect about 2,500 participants in that event, and about 10,000 people come in. It brings approximately $30 million into the local economy when that happens. That sums it up for today. Thank you for watching our Hawaii Traveler updates, and please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Let us know if you have any questions or feedback on this, and we'll do our best to share with you what we can from the local news updates. We'll see you in the next video. Mahalo.